Good evening and thanks very much for joining us. I'm Brittany Ramsey. Opposition MPP Sol Mamakwa is taking the Ford government to task following yesterday's announcement regarding residential school burial sites. While he welcomes the $10 million pledge to search for more remains like those recently found in BC, Mamakwa says as the only MPP who actually went to a residential school, he should have been consulted before that announcement. And he says Indigenous Affairs Minister Greg Rickford specifically told him that he would be. Ryan Benazzo reports.
Kiiwetinoong MPP Sol Mamakwa welcomes the government's $10 million commitment to investigate former residential school sites across Ontario. But he doesn't feel there was proper consultation beforehand.
I keep telling them I'm here if you need some advice.
Mamakwa took aim at the Indigenous Affairs Minister following Tuesday's announcement, saying on Twitter, "I am the only Ontario MPP that went to residential school. Greg Rickford told me I would be briefed about the announcement. This did not happen. I am stunned by this government's continued lack of understanding and respect."
He said to me, we're doing an announcement very shortly, and told me that, that I will get briefed before the announcement.
But Mamakwa says he saw it on TV like everyone else.
I wish that I could say that this was an anomaly.
While he was meeting with a group of Indigenous experts he had convened to discuss next steps. Mamakwa calls this lack of consultation itself an act of colonialism.
I have, the lived experience, and they don't. And I think they should have the courtesy to reach out and try and at least work with me, but not try to score political points.
Rickford's office did not reply to our request for comment. Mamakwa is glad that the work will begin in this province, but he says the Indigenous community and all Canadians need to brace themselves for more painful discoveries like the one in Kamloops.
It's going to go on, repeat, 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 repeat. And that's the true history of Canada, and we have to be ready for it.
Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
On to COVID-19, it's another low case count for the district today. The health unit reporting 5 new cases. 1 is in the Thunder Bay area, 3 are in First Nations communities, and 1 is elsewhere in the district. 3 are in the Greenstone area, 4 are due to close contact, and the other exposure source is pending. There were no new variants identified, and the active case count is now down to 35. Meanwhile, there are 12 COVID patients at the regional hospital. 5 are in the ICU, and the hospital is about 79% full. Well, after dipping below 300 yesterday, new COVID-19 cases in Ontario bounced up to 384 today. But the general provincial trend has recently seen case counts, hospitalizations, and positivity rate drop dramatically. That trend has political leaders across Ontario calling for the Ford government to speed up its reopening plan. Colin DeMello reports.
Patios across the province are packed, vaccinations are rising, and cases are declining. Now, some infectious disease specialists believe Ontario is well positioned to start the next step of its economic reopening.
Certainly think we can speed that up. I think all the indicators right now, whether it's vaccine coverage, whether it's hospitalizations, whether it's community case numbers, all of these things have been trending in the correct direction, the right direction for now several weeks.
Step 2 of the economic reopening isn't slated to begin until July 2nd. Until then, hair salons, for example, will have to remain closed. And in some communities, that has created a problem.
Lockdowns across the province have led to an underground market when it comes to personal care services. It's in backyards, it's in garages. You've created an underground economy.
Now, some Ontario mayors are pressing the Ford government to enter the second step as soon as possible.
Because a lot of them have suffered, severely as a result of not being able to open during the pandemic.
And some in the medical community believe the time is right.
I certainly think that we can start step 2 before the planned date in July the 2nd. In stage 3, we can really start to think about that at some point in July.
But one cabinet minister suggested the province has yet to decide what they're going to do.
Any decision that cabinet makes on the roadmap to reopening will be based on the advice that we've received from the Chief Medical Officer of Health. So I look forward to the ongoing discussions we're having at the cabinet table.
leaving businesses in limbo during the everlasting lockdown. Colin DeMello, CTV News.
Meanwhile, the OPP checkpoints at the Ontario-Manitoba and Ontario-Quebec borders were removed this morning as the province loosened its cross-border restrictions. The checkpoints were first set up in mid-April as COVID cases were surging in all three provinces. Only essential travelers and Ontario residents were allowed to enter the province, and many Winnipeggers with cottages in the northwest were turned away. We spoke to MPP Greg Rickford yesterday as the changes were about to take effect. He says the province has worked hard to lower its COVID numbers, and he hopes people coming in from Manitoba act responsibly, follow the protocols, and realize that hospitals in his riding have a limited capacity for any potential outbreaks that may happen.
I've had communications with the Deputy Premier. There's obviously an urgency by Manitoba folks, many who've been vaccinated, who want to check up on their property, get work done, and enjoy Lake of the Woods. But they'll know when they come here, they have to be safe. And I think the province of Ontario has a host of requirements for them when visiting outside the jurisdiction that they'll be required to meet. This has always been about good faith and people's personal, individual responsibilities to do the right thing.
City officials say they plan to meet with district municipalities and First Nations leaders late this summer about the new 10-year Superior North EMS master plan. That's assuming public health restrictions allow them to meet in person. Thunder Bay City Council accepted the plan this week. A number of district communities and First Nations have slammed the document. It calls for the Beardmore EMS base to be closed and 4 other bases, Terrace Bay and Scriber, as well as Nipigon and Red Rock, to be consolidated into 2. District leaders also say there's been little to no consultation so far. City staff and the consultants who developed the plan faced a number of questions about it on Monday.
Clearly, they don't feel like there was anything substantive or comprehensive enough that was consulted on. And so we still find ourselves here in this position of preparing to begin another consultation.
It was kind of purposefully set up to be data-driven, and then maybe, the consultation would be happening in the latter part of it. Is there a reason for that?
That was the terms of reference of the project from the beginning, was to make it data-based, and then once we saw what the data showed, to have the discussion at that point. In hindsight, should we have done it differently? Well, we're finding out we have to go back now and do it differently.
City officials say any changes that affect service either in Thunder Bay or across the district will need further approval from City Council before they're implemented. Thunder Bay Police responded to a 2-vehicle collision this afternoon where one person was injured. The crash took place at approximately 12:15 on a stretch of Simpson Street between Atlantic Avenue and Pacific Avenue. Responding officers were told that one male driver had vital signs absent and he was transported to hospital with life-threatening injuries. There was an extensive damage to the pickup truck and another passenger car, and police are still looking into the cause.
Initial information that we've received leads us to believe a medical event may have triggered the collision, but it's still under investigation at this time.
At last report, the injured male is in stable condition in hospital. The street was closed for most of this afternoon, but was expected to reopen by 6 p.m. Officials with the LRCA are worried about a massive impact on conservation areas across the province. This after the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks released a consultation guide outlining a number of changes under the Conservation Authorities Act. Local CAO Tammy Cook says the new guide will dictate how all conservation authorities are managed in the future. The proposed changes are broken down into core services that would be funded through the City of Thunder Bay and non-core services that the LRCA would be in charge of. One main concern is their capacity to complete the outlined requirements with only 11 full-time staff. Cook is also worried about costs to complete management plans and the mandatory creation of a new public advisory board. With recreation now deemed a non-mandatory program, Cook says that could have a devastating impact on conservation areas just like Mission Marsh.
So what that means is that if we need municipal levy to fund our conservation areas, we'll need to have memorandums of understanding with each of our member municipalities in order for that funding to flow through. So if we can't find enough self-generated revenue like our Explore card sales or parking sales or outside funding, if the municipalities decide not to fund that in the future, we may have to close our conservation areas.
City Council has advocated for recreation to be categorized as a mandatory program and for continued funding to maintain the land. The full consultation guide can be viewed on the Environmental Registry of Ontario website until June 27th. Confederation College, it's revamping one of its Indigenous courses, and the newly named program was unveiled today. The Native Child and Family Services program has undergone a transformation to become Onajagawan Indigenous Services. The name was gifted by Elder Sam Ashney Penescum of Martin Falls First Nation. The update to the program comes after consultations with various groups about what students will need after graduation.
Well, the program isn't changing a whole lot. We're restructuring what we call the curriculum and the courses to make them meet more of the community need.
Our program has always provided education for people who are going out to be helpers to children and families, and especially our Indigenous community.
It's good. I think it's good to get the word out, and hopefully people, embrace that new name and the understanding of what it means, and that's very important.
The name Onajagawan means being prepared for work that you will be doing as a helper. The New Look program begins this coming September. The last of Thunder Bay's high school graduation ceremonies took place at St. Pat's today. The event was held out front the school, and graduates were called one by one to receive their diploma and then finish it off with something sweet. Catalina Gillies says more.
For the second straight year, St. Patrick High School had perfect weather as they honored 221 graduates with an outdoor ceremony. Students were called up one at a time by Vice Principal Frank Roberto as he announced their post-secondary plans and any awards they won. After receiving their diploma just outside the school's front steps, graduates received a take-home lawn sign with their name on it. To finish off the walkthrough, a backdrop was in place for photo opportunities, and an ice cream truck was set up to reward the graduates with a frozen treat. Roberto says after doing this last year, they had a little more experience to expand the ceremony for this year's graduates.
It was just an amazing day, the support from the graduates, their parents, and everyone just being understanding of what our limitations were, and we did what we could, and we just hope the kids really appreciate it. We haven't seen them in a couple months, and just to have them walk through, it was special.
Students all around seemed very happy with the event. A few graduates shared their appreciation and excitement.
I think the outside grad is actually pretty cool because, you get to watch everyone, but you don't have to, sit in a hot auditorium. I was not expecting it to be this great, but I had so much fun seeing everyone, seeing my friends who I haven't seen in months, some of these people.
Yeah, I think that this was the perfect graduation. I couldn't imagine it any other way, and graduating with my best friends is so great.
It was really nice. Yeah, the school set it up very great, just walked through. It was very enjoyable.
I think it was great, especially under the circumstances we're in. At least we still got to have something.
Although it wasn't the traditional ceremony that St. Patrick's is used to having, graduates were still full of smiles. And that wraps up the high school graduations in Thunder Bay for 2021. Catalina Gillies, TBT News.